fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Well, welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. We've got Mr. Michael L. Hawley.
That's correct.
Michael
L. That's because there's this Michael Hawley author. He's some college professor that he's got us. So he got this thing first. So I had to use Michael L. Hawley.
Well, we'll have to have him taken out.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. We're gonna knock on his door. Do a visit.
Yeah, that's it. I guess I was adding all the shows for the IMDb this year, and I just, because you're Michael L. Hawley.
Yes, that is correct.
Make sure. That's the one with the picture, with the really old picture. From last
yes, and the L had large font on it, too.
Yeah, I noticed that. That's crazy, but, well, somebody's got to do it.
I'm excited today because, my Jack the Ripper research, some of the first kind of profilings or at that time, and I mean the rudimentary, so I'm really excited about today's interview.
Yeah, they were really rudimentary. I mean, they were washing the sites down after they
Oh, yes, they were. Yes, they were.
Giving away the pieces, the famous shawl. Anyway, joining us, we have got an author who's written a book called The Monsters We Make. This is Murder, Obsession, and the Rise of Criminal Profiling. So, Rachel Corbett, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Rachel, what's going on with you that you're writing such a dark and gloomy book? Ooh.
I've been an art writer actually for many years, so it's definitely a departure. No one understands what I'm doing.
I was going to say, what kind of art were you writing about?
Although criminal profiling, they do say, is an art.
Exactly, that's true.
What? Yeah, but do you have do you have sort of like this running thing that you've always wanted to get into this area of like criminal profiling and all forensics and all that and murder?
I mean, yes, kind of. That's basically true. It's never come up for me professionally, but I'm the person who watches the shows. I watch the crime shows. I got into true crime originally from reading, In Cold Blood. Obviously, I loved Michael Gilmore's book, Shot in the Heart, about his brother Gary Gilmore. I read a lot of these books when I was in college or around that age, and I don't know, they just always gripped me, and I secretly always wanted to write about it or read more, go into it. And I actually, set out when I started writing this book, I was thinking, how cool is criminal profiling? Like, I would love to learn how they do it. Maybe I'll learn about how it happens if I go into writing this. And then, of course, it transformed a little my understanding of what criminal profiling really is. But I think I'm pretty much one of those true crime junkies at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing when you get into it and understand more about profiling and more about the whole CSI even and stuff like that. Anytime you see any of those shows, it just looks so incredible and so fast and quick, and so intense. And it never is, It's just funny.
Yeah. And those guys, just kind of, they can just, the way they piece together clues, like it's magic,
Yeah.
In the corner.
Yeah. Well, they got to do it in 48 minutes, okay?
Exactly.
So, all got to get together here. We can't have any of this wasting time here.
Exactly.
So okay, so you're kind of into all this, and you kind of start putting it together. Did you have kind of an objective when you started this? Did you have kind of a goal? Did you have an idea like this is what I want to do with criminal profiling? Or did you want to write about what the facts are? Or did you want to cover stories? How did you decide to assemble this?
I think the book was really one long rabbit hole of research. I really didn't know when I set out what I was going to find. Like I said, I first started thinking maybe I'll, kind of really study the psychology of criminals and how people can figure this sort of thing out. Maybe I'll talk to psychiatrists and profilers and just learn how it's done and then find the story in that. But then as it evolved, I kept finding these different characters from different pieces of profiling's history. And they were like each so fascinating that I decided that I would sort of break the book up into different, like it's about 5 discrete essays. They're related thematically, and sometimes in characters come back and forth, but they're different moments in history. So I think my first discovery of Henry Murray, he's the Harvard psychologist who wrote the first of the CIA's, what they now call leadership profiles, but they profile a foreign, usually dictator, autocrat. In this case, it was Hitler that he profiled. And then he came back to Harvard and used what he learned at the CIA, or what was then the OSS, and started profiling his students in a way, and he conducted these very cruel experiments on his students, one of whom was Ted Kaczynski. So that whole story and him as a character, I thought maybe I could write a whole book about him, but my editor was like, no, people don't know who he is. But I thought he just became a big part of this book.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good to bring that in. And I see you also cover, like, not only that, but you said you followed the Jack the Ripper, the London alleyways, and Arthur Conan Doyle and stuff like that. So that's been a really ongoing, unsolved mystery, history, crime, and it still creates a huge following and stuff. Did you learn anything new there? Do you know who did it?
I'd like to ask Michael his opinion on this.
He did it. Well, he was there. He was there.
That's right.
He was only in his
the electron
20s.
life I discovered.
Yeah, he was only in his early 20s when that was happening.
Yeah. Well, so I was looking at it, from the profiling angle. I was curious to see how a lot of profilers in the FBI talk about Sherlock Holmes as really one of their antecedents. They talk about learning the art of profiling from Arthur Conan Doyle's writing. So I thought that was interesting, and it turns out that in fact that overlap between fiction and true crime is a lot stronger than you might think. And so in the days of Jack the Ripper, the London police, very young police department then, enlisted Arthur Conan Doyle to sort of consult on the case. And he weighed in with his opinion, and he kind of got into the mind of Sherlock and started to try to think how he would solve the case. And it's quite funny in a way that this happened, but they were so at a loss because obviously this was, an intractable case. And then, the police surgeon, Thomas Bond.
Yes, Thomas Bond.
You know about him, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I do. He's the one that the Assistant Commissioner Anderson asked to join in when Mary Kelly was murdered. But he did a little, again, a profiling that was used as you're discussing.
Yeah, he got into thinking more about what Jack's personality might be like, how he would dress, what his motivations were on sort of a psychological level, not just the obvious. Was it money? Was it jealousy? Or those kind of typical motivations. And
what's interesting is, you probably didn't see this, on the American side, there was this Dr. William Hammond who was a neurologist. He was actually the Surgeon General of the Army. So he was on the American side doing the same thing. And so it's kind of interesting when you see the kind of the combination of the two.
Oh, what did he find? I don't know about him, actually.
He found more like, Dr. Brent Kirby recently did criminal profiling on Jack the Ripper and found anger retaliatory, definitely not sadistic behavior because they were murdered before they were mutilated. And then so he was more into that type that the mind was going. Even though today we know serial killers are really not senile, but back then they still used that word.
Yeah.
And he was an expert at the diseases of the mind, like they used to call it paresis or paralysis of the insane, which is neurosyphilis. And but it's interesting how the two go back and forth like that. Dr. Hammond Moore was the surgeon,
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I know that Dr. Bond said it was satyriasis.
Yes.
The maniacal lust of a satyr.
Yes.
Yeah.
And exactly. And then so, you can see that's one of the areas I researched, but that's kind of interesting how you start right there. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, that people talk about that profile that Thomas Bond wrote as kind of the first criminal profile. Of course, we don't know if it was the first, but they characterize it that way when they talk about it in history, kind of.
Those same people forgot about Dr. William Hammond. If you
Yeah.
see predates about Dr. Bond.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, good to know. But I did like the drawing back and forth between what is real, what is not real. You know, people were writing Arthur Conan Doyle letters about their actual cases, you know, in their personal lives. You know, a thief or something that they encountered, and then as if he could solve the crimes for them. And I think that strain has kind of carried on throughout the history of profiling, even into today.
So what's your subtext here? What's your meaning here? At the end of the day, of course, there's entertainment and there's some things people will learn, but what is it you hope someone takes away from this book?
Well, I think it's about some of the flaws of prediction. We have this fundamental human desire to understand the minds of the people who scare us the most. But in our desperation to do that, I think we distract ourselves a little bit from what we might really, or what we ought to really be looking out for. Profiling is extremely seductive as an idea. But when we try to actually implement it, you know, as we talked about earlier, side of things, it can actually ensnare the wrong people. I talk about there's a chapter in the book where I look at a sheriff's office that is profiling children and to really devastating effect. And so I think that, you know, really a prediction is more often than not, as I found in the book, just really a pre-existing expectation. So often the people are inserting themselves into their profiles, into their predictions.
Therefore, a lot of times it's not as accurate as it could be, right?
They haven't historically, the profiles haven't matched the suspects as much as you would like to think. And you know, a lot of profiles get, you know, maybe certain aspects right. You know, they knew Ted Kaczynski was going to be educated, for example. They thought he would be a white male because that was like every bomber in American history. So it's not that they can't get things right, but it's how useful is that information in really nailing down a particular person. That's proved to be more difficult, I think.
Right. So in essence, really, profiling doesn't really find the criminals or the killers initially. It's something that it's more of an assembly afterwards, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the best case scenario, maybe it will weed out or kind of direct where you look first. So like with Ted Kaczynski, when you have someone who leaves absolutely no physical evidence at all, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. And so maybe, you know, they start looking at white men who are educated from the Midwest first, or whatever, you know, the case may be. But yeah, I think otherwise, typically it's a lot of the great profiles are things we looked at after the suspect was arrested by other means. Then you go, oh, they really had the guy, but they didn't catch the guy that way.
So I think these researchers with some of the Jack the Ripper, they need to read your book, because the FBI did a criminal profile of Jack the Ripper in 1984, which is over 40 years old. And now some of them say, if it doesn't fit that profile, therefore it's not that person. It's proof.
Oh, wow.
Slow down. That just grinds me.
Did John Douglas participate in that? I think he wrote one as well as part of that.
That rings a bell, John Douglas.
I think, you know, it's also, you know, we're talking about a time when there wasn't the same level of you know, DNA evidence or you know, cell phones. You know, we have a lot more to work with today, and they didn't really have that back then. I think that what's unfortunate is that there was this kind of divorce between police officers and FBI agents and then the psychiatric community. They were kind of at loggerheads. They kind of disliked each other. The FBI agents saw themselves as really, you know, they had the street smarts and the intuition, and the psychologists were like, they had all the data and, you know, the kind of a better understanding of the psychology of violent people. And I wish that they had been able to kind of collaborate more than they did. I think there could have been better outcomes all the way around.
Right. It came from that, but when you look back at some of the old cases in the 60s, even the police departments weren't working together. You look at the Manson case, and you look how one police department wouldn't share anything with the other, even though they're really working on the same case, and it was that seemed to be where it started.
Yeah.
Was there a part of, when you're doing the research and you're putting together the book, was there a particular thing that kind of surprised you more than anything? That you learned something, it changed your mind about something, and now you have a different opinion about today as you did before you started this?
So many things. I mean, the first thing is that learning that profiles solve only about 2.7% of cases in that one study we were talking about earlier. That was the first surprise. And then, I think it was, the fact that, I don't know what you think, Michael, but the fact that the Jack the Ripper case was kind of solved, or may have been solved at least, that is not something I had any awareness of. And I don't think we can conclusively say that, but they had...
No, it's not been solved. Especially the DNA thing's all bunk, absolute bunk.
Yes.
That's another half-hour discussion, but...
go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. This is your show.
No. I guess I should say, we may not know who it is, but the Anderson, I think it was, wrote that we knew who the suspect was.
Oh,
and they didn't reveal it.
Oh, you mean the ascertained fact? Even though, and the problem was it was based on an eyewitness testimony that was 2 years old, not even in a lineup. And then it was actually ego, why he said that. He didn't say that for the first 5 years. And as a matter of fact, his number 2 guy said it was a different person. So there's a lot of issues around him. So and then the number 2 guy was convinced of another person, and so both of them were right there in the trenches. And then that particular victim was not even in the jurisdiction of Scotland Yard. It was the City of London Police, which Assistant Commissioner Anderson wasn't involved with anyway. So there's so many stories within stories. That's why us ripperologists love to talk and debate.
Yeah, well, there you go. Exactly. Names. There's fiction in there. There's probably a little fact. It's a lot of ego, and who knows what else. Yeah.
I would think that the detective work too was pretty primitive too back then. They didn't have anything really. Nothing. Walk in and then they cleaned up the room and washed down the blood and threw away all the items, and it was just kind of crazy that how would they ever really solve a crime other than just kind of a lot of opinions and feelings about people that they have as suspects.
Yeah, over a dozen confessions. They used to beat confessions, so it's like...
Did they have fingerprints then?
No.
No, they did not.
Yeah.
No.
That's after that. And then so, of course, they really didn't have anything. And again, it's just what Al was saying. When Polly Nichols was murdered, they rushed her out of there so the public wouldn't see her body, and they tried to scrape the blood off, wash the blood off.
Yeah.
So,
and that's how that famous shawl got around, because initially, I guess, a cop took that, washed it, and gave it to his wife for Christmas. Nice.
Yeah, and that police officer was actually working 11 miles to the north in a different jurisdiction. So,
can you imagine your husband giving you a washed shawl from a murder victim?
How romantic.
Yeah. It's like, here, honey, look what I got. What's this stain? Oh, don't.
Yeah. Don't worry about stain.
Could you imagine? So, I don't know how reliable that is anyway. I'm not trying to put down policing, and they did the best. That's all they had, right? They went there, and I don't know that I could have done anything different. We didn't know anything, right?
There's a lot of women who love true crime today, so maybe one of those women would actually like that gift. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
True.
Maybe it'd be trendy. He was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
But it comes down to it's just one of those things. I think it's only as good as the training and the policing you have. So I think it's a good thing to have this kind of. Do you think it's advancing really, really good right now? The whole profiling thing. Do you think it's actually going to become something more effective in policing?
Well, I think certainly policing is advancing, with the technology we have, surveillance and the DNA and everything. I think it's, as we're seeing, I think there's fewer serial killers now. It's harder to get away with more than one. So I think certainly policing is getting better. I'm not convinced that profiling is getting better because, a lot of what they're doing now is the data-driven profiling or algorithmic and AI profiling. And, on the one hand, these are really advanced techniques, or they can be, but on the other hand, they get a lot wrong too. And we haven't gotten to the point where, facial recognition still doesn't recognize dark skin properly in the same way. And some of the data that's used in, predictive policing was found to be, inaccurate data drawn from old policing tactics that we wouldn't use now. So it's giving sort of a biased, sort of feeding bias into the system. So I worry a little bit about, these ideas of scientific sounding methods of profiling. But in reality, they might just kind of be doing the same thing we had before.
So what did they learn about Hitler? Like when Mr. Murray, what do we know that would surprise us? Anything?
Well, there's what he imagined. He was a very creative man. He went all into Hitler's life. He wrote, I think it was about 50 pages of speculation on mostly his sexuality. He was really into that and what his relationship with his mother was like. That, I don't know if that's true or not. That's hard to say.
Right.
He did get some things right. He imagined that he would martyr himself in some way, perhaps, commit suicide or something like that so that, he could go down as a hero to the German people. He did commit suicide after all. There were some things he got right. But it was also just one of these very early exercises in the CIA, the OSS, it was at the time, was hiring anybody with any idea about how to stop Hitler. So they had, they had Barnum and Bailey performers in there. They had all these crazy schemes. They were going to drop bats from planes with little bombs in them and all kinds of wild stuff. So they really didn't know what to do, and they were interested in everybody. This was when Wild Bill Donovan was at the helm. And so the idea of bringing in a psychoanalyst was really a crazy thing to do back then. These people still saw psychoanalysis as like voodoo, basically. But they wanted to give it a try, and it's something that has stuck. They still do these, they call them leadership profiles today. They did them of Saddam Hussein, Vladimir Putin, Osama bin Laden. They all had these kind of profiles done as well. Are you going to work on another book like this, continue this research, or are you going to jump back into art? Like, where do you go next? Well, so I have a very full-time job. I'm a features writer at New York Magazine, and I cover everything there. Very possible I could cover crime there. I hope to, actually. But I also cover everything. It could be art. It could be, I'm working on a story about therapy right now. So it could be a lot of things. I would love to write another book, but it's going to be a little while probably because I don't know what it would be. And I do have this other very busy job. So we'll have to see where this goes. One thing could lead to the other. We'll see. Right. Yeah. You just don't know until the end of it. So what do you think this process has done for you? What has writing this book done to change you, or has it? I do have a personal account in the book, so I guess you could say in some ways my motivation, my sort of personal interest in this subject is from a murder in my own childhood, and that and my own desire to profile the man who did it, someone who I couldn't believe was capable of such a thing. I think I really wanted to get inside his mind like a profiler would and understand what he did. And I tried actually really hard. I talked to experts, I interviewed people, I treated it like an investigative journalist or an investigator of some kind. And it didn't really answer my question. I still didn't understand what happened with him. And although I got the data, he did in fact kind of fit the demographic characteristics of someone who would do this crime. But emotionally it didn't make sense to me still. I think part of it was my own desire to understand myself in that process. If I'm trying so hard to understand this thing, what is that about, and why do so many other people have this same urge? So I think that's part of what, for me, I kind of closed the door a little bit on that investigation of him and then of myself. I think is something, that's something I guess I took away from this process on a personal note.
Well, let's talk about how you like to be contacted by readers, fans, people, everybody. Do you have social media, website, lemonade stand? Like, what do you do? Where do people go to find Rachel?
I'm at Rachel N. Corbett on...
See, Rachel N. Corbett. I like that. See, Al? The better authors have a middle initial. Just like Alan R. Warren.
Exactly. There's another Rachel Corbett in Australia, and she got to all the social media first.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. See?
That's why I've got an R in my name, too, because there was an Alan Warren he was a foot doctor, and he had like 3 or 4 books out before I even started.
About podiatry?
Yeah, so I had to put an R in my name in order to separate. So.
See?
Happens to all of us. So Rachel N. Corbett, on Instagram or Twitter, X. I have a website, rachel-corbett.com, and you can contact me there also. Well,
fantastic. We'll have that up along with everything else, like your book and everything, so people can find you. What can I say? Certainly been a pleasure. And everyone, we've been talking about the book, The Monsters We Make, Murder, Obsession, and the Rise of Criminal Profiling. The author, Rachel Corbett's been our guest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.